Hello, good evening, and welcome back. So as we've seen, people are being encouraged to go back to work, which is fantastic, from Wednesday, of course, in particular. And that if you can work from home, then do. But if you can't, then you are still explicitly encouraged to go to work. If it's manufacturing, construction, that kind of thing. If you have to be hands-on, if you're a labourer, then of course you have to be where you need to be. And several things have been in place that we'll get into in more detail for home renovations, for example, if it's conveyancers, contractors, to try and stagger their times. That would also then ease public transport if they're not labourers themselves. So fantastic, it all seems to be going to plan. However, as this lockdown isn't officially lifted, the furlough scheme has been extended by 4 months. This isn't just for lockdown in particular people who can't work, but it's for particularly the hospitality occupation, for the jobs of which don't have a lot of uptake at the moment because there aren't a lot of customers, because people aren't so willing to go outside, because restaurants can't be fully open as they had before, because people aren't traveling as much as they were before, and therefore there isn't so much need for the employees. And so instead of letting these people go so they can pursue other jobs, the thought is, well, it's unfair to say, go find a new job or go make something that you're proud of. Instead, it's, no, keep hanging on to this job and we'll bring you back when we can, but still have you being paid 80%. And the funny thing is that, of course, the people who are higher earners, who therefore could get by on 80% a lot easier, are, of course, the people who can work from home, most likely. The people whose work does not have to be disrupted because they're no longer in the office. The higher earners who could get by on 80% aren't going to be the ones most affected by this. It will instead be the people of much less income who are struggling to get by more so, that will therefore struggle especially in order to get by on 80%. Hence the mortgage holidays, for example, of 3 months. Of course, that's the idea behind that. But, I said it has been extended for 4 months, but, Rishi Sunak said, the government will ask companies to start sharing the cost of the scheme from August. So if they're not back at work by then, although the government will be having 80%, they say that they want the companies to start sharing. What that will actually mean, realistically speaking, is yet to be seen, of course. That so far it's just been a blanket across the board in order to say 80% for everyone, that's fine. After that, I think he'll try to be more in particular to say, oh, if you're on a particular occupation with these exceptions, and it's basically just where the lobbying comes in at that point to help out the bigger businesses instead of the smaller businesses, because they're the ones that can line politicians' pockets, and that bribery is legalized through the name of lobbying. They'll never vote themselves out of power. So a quarter of the workforce, 7.5 million people, are now covered by the scheme, which has cost £14 billion per month. So that's what the rest of us are paying. The Chancellor said that from August, the scheme would continue for all sectors and regions of the country, but with greater flexibility to support the transition back to work. Employers currently using the scheme will then be able to bring furloughed employees back part-time. If they're trying to lay anybody else, they're told that they have to run a 45-day consultation. If they wish to cut more than 100 jobs, they must run a 45-day consultation, meaning the 18th of May was the last date employers could start this process before the furlough scheme ended in June. The Chancellor rejected suggestions some people might get addicted to furlough if it was extended. Saying nobody who is on the furlough scheme wants to be on this scheme. People up and down this country believe in the dignity of their work, going to work, providing for their families. It's not their fault their business has been asked to close or asked to stay home. I agree with the latter bit. If maybe we got this under control sooner, or realised that herd immunity was actually worthwhile, as I say, with some like in prison populations where 98% of people are asymptomatic with coronavirus, then maybe it's not such a big deal. And if people's immune systems are healthy because the people are healthy, then it isn't a big deal with coronavirus or COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 in particular. But as it pertains to people not being happy on the furlough scheme, is that necessarily accurate, given that you have people who are unemployed, and then after, depending on which statistics, 6 months or a year, they're no longer counted as unemployed. They're essentially permanently unemployed. They're just out of work. They've given up. Doesn't matter. They're not going to be counted on the statistics anymore of unemployment because they're not unemployed. They're just permanently jobless. It's not even thought of that they're looking for jobs anymore. They've given up, so therefore they're off their statistics, and that's how to make their statistics misleading, of course. So it's not quite accurate to say that some people could get addicted to it, especially seeing as some people with other benefits entailed, including in the US, that they're getting paid more than they did before, and therefore they don't want to go back to work because it's something that most likely, if they're on the furlough scheme, as I say, lower earners, therefore it won't be such a rewarding job, and if they're getting paid more as well, then of course they wish to stay home. And I'm still hoping that everybody on a furlough scheme has used their time productively so that they don't have to go back to a job they don't like and can instead do something more fulfilling to them. So, moving on, as they say that there isn't a particular great solution, we're going to go on to other effects. So, of course, as people haven't been able to earn as much as they had before, we've seen it drop down in hospitality, as I've said. It also affects the housing market, which has now been released from lockdown in England, not in Wales, Northern Ireland or Scotland, but nonetheless it has opened in England. What does that mean? It means estate agents can open, viewings can be carried out, and removal firms and conveyances can restart operations. They say it's estimated that there are 450,000 buyers and renters with plans on hold. What that means is that anybody having a renovation, they can start to get that done again. Anybody who's really suffering and is trying to turn or flip a property in order to get by because that is their job, they're flipping properties, then they can start to get an income again. And the same with rent, of course, that if they're trying to rent something out because they are a landlord primarily and that is their source of income, then they can get back to doing that. We've seen rents decrease as well of people renting new properties. That's decreased as well as housing. Compared to last year, it's about 10% of what it was. It's about a December level, as we see here for the month of March compared to last month. And the estate agents closed, yes, but of course there was still a lot done online. So for the figures, they say that there was a 70% drop in buyer demand over the course of a few weeks, and rental demand is 42% down since the start of March, according to Zoopla. So that's how they've been faring for new homes. And that's not the only thing that people wish to move into a bigger place or a newer place permanently, but also they wish to move and get away from it all, and hence holidays. Hence now it's the jet age that it's far cheaper for everybody to go abroad. People like to. And at the moment, of course, they're not able to. Airports closed. Predominantly they're closed, and airlines are grounded, in which case the price has gone up considerably. And even just trying to find a place to go to that isn't on lockdown and you can actually stay is also incredibly difficult if you're even allowed to travel to get to the airport, because it's not for work then. That's made it increasingly difficult as well. So, as Matt Hancock has said here, that the traditional big break holiday season is unlikely. Social distancing will have to be maintained for some time. He said the conclusion from that is it is unlikely that big, lavish international holidays are going to be possible for this summer. But there are thoughts that some people might like to get away for a couple of weeks and then get back. Although the weather, of course, for once, so I'm a Brit, talk about the weather, has been very pleasant. So people will be considering, well, actually, maybe staying at home isn't so bad. A bit like in 76, I believe it was, where they just had a hot summer all year. On top of this, to make it more difficult for people travelling, not only can they not afford it because they haven't been earning it, not only are the airlines grounded as well, but of course, there are still plans to introduce the 14-day quarantine for international travellers to prevent a second spike in the virus, which of course makes it even less appealing to fly, or at least fly to Britain. So, as Willie Walsh, the boss of IAG, which owns British Airways, said, it would force him to review his plans to ramp up flights in the summer. There's nothing positive in anything I heard Prime Minister say, he told MPs. Virgin Atlantic has since abandoning Gatwick, essentially. They said that there'll be more flights to Tel Aviv, as well as routes linking Florida with Manchester, Glasgow, London Heathrow and Belfast. And of course they only started out in Gatwick, renting their aircraft, and were just trying for years in order to overcome BA blocking them from Heathrow, and now they've pulled out of Gatwick as well. They've really gone up in the world, if you will. But they say here that John and Irene Hayes, owners of travel company Hayes Travel, which took over Thomas Kirk's shop last year, said the news has not dampened people's enthusiasm to get away. Mr. Hay told BBC Radio 5 Live, there was a real desire to go on holiday, people have been locked down, and in terms of new bookings, we're getting strong demand. Talking about trips which were booked earlier in the year, Mrs. Hayes added, many people are not cancelling, they are just deferring their holidays, or in some cases holding on to a credit note for now. Mr. Hayes also thought that having to self-isolate at home for 14 days after returning from abroad may not stop people travelling, seeing as if they've already gone abroad, now if they've been on lockdown, been in quarantine for a long time, then they've gone abroad, then they come back to the life of quarantining for 2 weeks, it's going to be just the same. So for British people, that isn't going to be such a big deal if they come back and just have to quarantine again. If they can get the time from work, seeing as different companies have different furlough schemes saying that you can't go away and you've still got to be accessible just in case, then we'll have to see how that pans out. But, of course, nonetheless, this might be too little too late, seeing as airlines and the travel industry generally have been among the biggest financial losers of the international lockdown. Aircraft fleets have been grounded and thousands of jobs cuts announced, with BA shedding 12,000 jobs and Virgin 3,000 jobs. So, that's all for today. The furlough scheme has been extended. People are suffering as is to be expected. Most people are trying to get back to work, but I think Rishi Sunak is a bit too optimistic for how that will pan out. And hey, of course, the Hayes Travel is optimistic because you got to quash a rumour anyway that if they think that you're doing badly, then no one will trust you to be able to get them to their destination, just like we saw with Thomas Cook, of course, when they went under last year. So, thank you all very much, and as always, until next time, have a good one.